Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire. August 25, 1944. 6 in the morning, and the light in Hut 6 has not changed in 5 years. Fluorescent tubes hum over rows of trestle tables. A young woman in a cardigan sets down a slip of paper covered in 5-letter groups, rubs her eyes, and reaches for the next intercept. Somewhere across the channel, General George S. Patton's Third Army is thundering east towards the Seine, and the man himself, riding in an open car with 2 ivory-handled revolvers on his hips, has no idea that his next move has already been shaped by a teenager with a headache in rural England. The intercept in front of her is nonsense. 5-letter blocks, no spaces, no punctuation, no obvious pattern. It could be a supply request. It could be an order to retreat. It could be nothing at all. A training exercise. A dummy transmission sent to waste Allied time. But there is one thing she knows for certain before she has decoded a single word of it. One mathematical certainty buried in the machine that produced it. And that certainty is worth more than any cipher clerk in Berlin ever understood. No letter in an Enigma message could ever represent itself. An A could become anything from B to Z. It could never, under any circumstances, become an A. That one restriction, a quirk of German engineering meant to add complexity, instead handed Bletchley Park the crack in the door. Through that crack came Ultra, the intelligence that reached the desks of Eisenhower, Montgomery, Bradley, and Patton, and quietly, unglamorously, helped decide the shape of the Second World War. This is the story of how a single missing letter became one of the most consequential flaws in the history of warfare, and how a general famous for pearl-handled pistols and blistering profanity came to depend, every single morning, on a folder of paper produced by mathematicians he never met. By the summer of 1944, the Allies faced a problem that raw manpower and industrial output could not solve alone. Germany's Wehrmacht, in retreat across France, remained a disciplined fighting force capable of rapid, coordinated counterattacks. Allied commanders had tanks, aircraft, and men in abundance, but they lacked something far more valuable: certainty about where the enemy actually was. Aerial reconnaissance could photograph roads and railway yards, but it could not read a commander's mind. Captured prisoners lied, exaggerated, or simply did not know. Traditional signals interception could locate a radio transmitter, but the message itself, encrypted on the Enigma machine, remained a locked box. The scale of the problem was staggering. The German military operated tens of thousands of Enigma machines across every branch of service, each one capable of producing more possible letter substitutions than there are atoms in the observable universe by some contemporary estimates, a number so large that brute force decryption by hand was mathematically absurd. A single machine, with its 3 or 4 rotors chosen from a set of 5 or more, its reflector, and its plugboard connecting pairs of letters, could be configured in over 150 million ways. Change the settings once every 24 hours, as German operators did, and any message not broken within that window became historical curiosity rather than actionable intelligence. Without a way in, Allied commanders were fighting half-blind. Convoys crossing the Atlantic had been slaughtered by U-boats operating on intelligence the Allies could not see coming. Rommel's Africa Corps had run rings around British forces in the desert, seemingly anticipating moves before they were made. Something had to give, and it needed to give quickly because the alternative was measured in sunken ships and dead soldiers. The Poles had made the first breakthrough in the 1930s, reconstructing the machine's wiring through mathematics before the war even began. But by 1940 the Germans had added complexity that outpaced the original methods. Britain needed a fresh approach, and it needed people capable of finding one. That answer took shape at Bletchley Park, a Victorian country house requisitioned by the Government Code and Cipher School and turned into what its inhabitants half-jokingly called Station X. Here, mathematicians, chess champions, crossword enthusiasts, and linguists were assembled under conditions of total secrecy, forbidden even to tell their own families what they did each day. Alan Turing, a Cambridge mathematician with an interest in the theoretical limits of computation, became the central figure in cracking the naval variant of Enigma, but the entire operation rested on a foundation of careful, unglamorous mathematical deduction, and at the heart of that deduction sat the machine's one fatal weakness. Enigma's rotors scrambled each letter through a physical circuit, but its reflector, a fixed component that sent the electrical signal back through the rotors a second time, could never route a letter back to itself. This was not a security feature so much as an unavoidable consequence of the machine's wiring, and it was assumed by German cryptographers to be a harmless technical quirk, something no enemy could exploit. They were wrong. Turing and his colleagues, working alongside the Polish-derived bomba concept, built a machine roughly the size of a large wardrobe, weighing over a ton, its front studded with 36 rotating drums, each mimicking an Enigma rotor, wired together and driven by an electric motor that made a sound witnesses compared to a room full of knitting needles clicking in unison. This was the bomb. The bomb did not read messages. It eliminated impossibilities. Code breakers would guess a probable word or phrase likely to appear in a message, a crib, often a routine phrase German operators used out of habit, weather reports frequently beginning with the same predictable words, or a commander's name repeated in a signature. Using the certainty that no letter could encrypt to itself, analysts could test a crib against an intercepted message and instantly discard any position where the crib letter matched the ciphertext letter in the same position, since that alignment was mathematically impossible on a real Enigma machine. This single rule, this one absent letter, shrank an impossible search space down to something a machine the size of a wardrobe could chew through in under an hour. Bombs were manufactured in their hundreds by the British Tabulating Machine Company in Letchworth, each one costing roughly the price of a modest house, and by 1944 around 200 were running day and night across Bletchley Park and its outstations, tended largely by servicewomen from the Women's Royal Naval Service, who fed in crib settings and watched drums spin until a stop indicated a candidate solution. Once a day's settings were recovered, every message sent on that network for the following 24 hours could be decrypted almost as fast as it was intercepted. The raw German text then passed to translators and intelligence officers, who distilled it into digestible summaries, stripped of any detail that might reveal the source, and distributed under conditions so strict that recipients could be court-martialed for so much as mentioning the word ultra outside a designated tent. Getting that intelligence to a commander in the field without exposing its origin was its own quiet triumph of organization. Special liaison units, small teams of RAF officers trained in both intelligence work and absolute discretion, traveled with every major Allied headquarters, Patton's Third Army included. Each unit carried its own portable cipher equipment and reported directly back to Bletchley, bypassing ordinary chains of command entirely. A general could read an ultra-summary, but he could never keep the paper, never discuss its contents beyond a tiny circle, and could act on it only if a plausible alternative source, a reconnaissance flight, a captured document could be invented to disguise how he had really known. Patton, for all his reputation as an instinctive, swashbuckling commander who trusted his gut over paperwork, read his ultra-summaries with real attention. During the pursuit across France in August 1944, decrypts revealing German fuel shortages and disorganized withdrawal routes helped confirm that the retreating Wehrmacht units in his path were weaker and more scattered than conventional reconnaissance suggested, giving him the confidence to push his armored spearheads further and faster than a cautious reading of the map alone might have allowed. Liaison officers recalled him pacing his command trailer, cigar unlit, running through the overnight folder before issuing orders, blunt and impatient, but rarely dismissive of what Ultra told him. The intelligence did not win battles by itself. Fuel shortages, weather, and the sheer exhaustion of retreating German forces mattered enormously too, and historians continue to debate exactly how much weight any single Ultra decrypt carried in any single decision. But the pattern across 1944 is difficult to ignore. An army moving with unusual confidence through terrain where the enemy's true condition was, for once, not entirely a mystery. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. Germany was not blind to the risk. Enigma was, in its day, a genuinely formidable system, considerably more secure than most Allied cipher equipment in general military use, and German naval and army cryptographers periodically added complexity, extra rotors, revised plugboard rules, in the belief that the machine remained unbroken. Some German analysts did raise doubts, and a handful of internal reviews questioned whether Enigma traffic might be compromised. But these concerns were repeatedly dismissed, partly out of institutional confidence and partly because the alternative, that the Allies had been reading German signals for years, was almost too catastrophic to seriously entertain. American cryptographers, working independently, achieved something comparable against Japan's diplomatic purple cipher and later naval codes, feeding intelligence that contributed to the victory at Midway, but the sheer scale of European Enigma traffic and the daily key changes across dozens of separate networks made the Bletchley Park operation the largest and most sustained code-breaking effort of the war. Where German engineers built one machine and trusted its complexity, British and Polish mathematicians built an industrial process around a single structural flaw and trusted their logic instead. The material impact of Ultra is easier to trace in some campaigns than others, and honest historians resist the temptation to claim it single-handedly won the war. In the Battle of the Atlantic, Ultra decrypts of naval Enigma traffic allowed convoys to be rerouted away from waiting U-boat wolf packs, and shipping losses fell sharply in periods when the naval cipher was being read currently, only to spike again during blackout periods when the Germans introduced a fourth rotor in 1942 and Bletchley temporarily lost the thread. In North Africa, intelligence on Rommel's supply convoys allowed the Royal Navy and RAF to target tankers and transport ships with an accuracy that starved the Africa Corps of fuel at critical moments. In Normandy and the subsequent breakout, Ultra helped confirm the success of deception operations, convincing German high command that the main invasion would come at Calais, and later informed the pursuit across France that Patton exploited so aggressively. Winston Churchill himself called the codebreakers his geese that laid the golden eggs and never cackled, a rare acknowledgment, made only in private, of just how highly he valued their silence. The secret held for nearly 30 years after the war ended. Bletchley Park was dismantled, its bombs largely destroyed or scrapped, its staff bound by the Official Secrets Act and, for the most part, genuinely never speaking of their work again, even to spouses. It was not until the 1970s that the scale of the operation became public, forcing a quiet reassessment of how several major campaigns had actually been fought. Today, visitors to Bletchley Park can walk through the restored huts and see a rebuilt bomb in operation, its drums turning with the same mechanical clatter that once meant the difference between a convoy reaching port and a convoy sinking beneath the Atlantic. Enigma's designers built a machine of extraordinary mechanical sophistication, confident that its complexity made it unbreakable. They were nearly right, but nearly is not the same as entirely, and the one gap they left, the one letter their reflector could never produce, was enough. It was enough for a group of mathematicians in a requisitioned country house to turn impossibility into probability, and probability into a working machine. It was enough to give Allied commanders, Patton among them, a window into decisions the enemy believed were theirs alone to know. A single missing letter, repeated across millions of messages, became the thread that unraveled a war. The house at Bletchley Park still stands, its lawns quiet now, its huts turned into museum galleries where school groups shuffle past display cases holding rotor wheels and plugboard cables. Nothing about the building looks as though it changed the course of the 20th century. But somewhere in a drawer of yellowing paper, in the careful looping handwriting of a wartime cipher clerk, sits proof that it did. One flaw, one letter that could never be itself, was enough to turn silence into knowledge, and knowledge into victory. Patton read every word. He was never told exactly where those words came from, and he never asked twice. He simply used them, and somewhere behind him, unseen and unthanked, the geese kept laying their golden eggs and never once made a sound.